At some point, he was making fun of Lebanese, and he said that he thinks Lebanese babies are born and immediately do this. So now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the National Initiative for Arts and Health in the Military Continuum. My name is Larry Gallmeyer. I'm Managing Director at Aetna in Community Relations and Urban Marketing. And if you find yourself here thinking about why is it important to engage in the military and veterans in their health, you're probably not far from where I was just one short year ago. I myself am a veteran of Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and while serving was injured. I have suffered a back injury and exposure to chemicals, which has left me with a disability certified through the VA. And when I was first asked to go down to Maryland last year to Bethesda and attend National Arts and Healing Across the Military Continuum Conference, I looked at my manager and I said, "What? Are you kidding me?" Because you have to understand, I'm not from an arts background, not from an arts education. I was born and bred and grew up in the military. And so I thought this art stuff was kind of hoo-ha, to say the least. But when I got down there, I had such an experience. I didn't expect it. Had the opportunity to see singers, had the opportunity to see dancers, had an opportunity to see veterans with disabilities suffering from post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, military sexual trauma, performing in the arts. And I think the thing that stood out to me the most was there was a group of musicians that came out. There were 6 of them, a couple of guitarists, a drummer, and a person that played the keyboard, and a singer. And when they came walking down the aisle to take their position, they carried themselves, you could see they had pride, but they didn't seem to be as happy as you might expect. They didn't seem sad, but they didn't seem happy. But the minute they started to play those instruments, or they started to perform, you could see in their eyes and their face, their eyes began to glow. Their faces turned to smiles, and they really became alive. And that's when I realized that, holy cow, this isn't just a lot of hooey and foo-fa. There's really some value here to the arts and helping across the military continuum. So I am very, very honored and privileged to be here with this great panel that's going to talk about some work that they're doing down in Tampa and the way they're using arts to engage veterans and helping them through, whether it be post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, really enhancing the lives of our veterans, the active duty military, and their families, which is some excellent, excellent work. Now, just one point of housekeeping before we begin. Everyone should have a colored piece of paper at your place. We're going to use those for questions, so if you have a question throughout the event, just go ahead and jot it down on a piece of paper. Kate will come around and pick them up and then bring them up. I'll read them off to the panel so that we can answer them, since we are live streaming to the World Wide Web today. All right, so then without further ado, I have the pleasure of introducing Marita Wester. She is going to set the context for us a little bit before we get started.
Thanks so much, Larry. I'm Marita Wester, Senior Director of Arts Policy at Americans for the Arts, and also the proud co-chair of the National Initiative for Arts and Health in the Military. A few years ago, in 2011, a small group of arts folks were in conversation with health providers and practitioners at the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. And many of those groups were already realizing and working with the service members that were at Walter Reed. And the question was, seeing the value of these interchanges and how much the artists and the creative arts therapists were bringing to this population, how could we actually expand that on a national level? And would there even be interest? What we did was we envisioned what was a singular convening at that time, Arts and Healing for Warriors, and we were wondering if people would come to talk about how we could further integrate and connect the arts with the needs of returning service members, veterans, their families, and caregivers. Well, the first event was a success. It led to other events where we continue to engage further with folks about what were the strategies at the national level that we could do collaboratively to bring the arts on a broader scale and to more and more of this population who could benefit so greatly from them. In 2013, the results of these conversations and the recommendations that we heard from the more than 500 people who had come to the series of events that we had planned resulted in arts, health, and well-being across the military continuum, a white paper and framing a national plan for action, which I like to say is really our snapshot in time. Because what we did throughout these 3 years was we looked at what we knew was happening in different parts of the country, in military treatment facilities, in VA centers, in the community, the work of creative arts therapists as part of medical teams and in the health modalities, along the artistic continuum to artists who were working with patients and families in healthcare settings and in residence, but also in the community. What the white paper told us, and what we heard over and over, which really was the genesis for conceiving of this particular panel and why Americans for the Arts is very strongly vested in this effort, is that these military service members, the military health professionals, people across the VA, realize the value of the arts. But what they also realize is that there is a real growing need to be able to bring and extend what they are able to do into the community and to connect and to break down the silos and how we really start working together and evolve beyond the silos that used to exist. So I'm actually very happy to be part of this panel and to bring one of a stellar example of what is happening in one community that really looks at the arts across the artistic continuum and also across the military continuum. Another strong recommendation we heard was that while we had initially focused on returning warriors and their needs, their families and their caregivers were saying, this is a larger group we need to reach. In order to really serve the individual, we have to look at the family members. We have to look at the community where they reside. And we have to be very creative about how we serve that very extensive continuum from pre-deployment to deployment to post-deployment. And also recognize, and I think this will become evident in our session today, that the veterans community is very diverse, very, very diverse. And while we have some very serious challenges immediately with the Iraq and Afghanistan veterans who have recently returned and who continue to return home, the largest group of veterans in the country is from the Vietnam era. And we have a duty and a service and an opportunity based on the communities to really look at the entire population. So with that, I'll be back to talk a little bit about next steps with the national initiative, but that's really setting a little bit of the context for why we're having the conversation today.
Thank you, Marita. So I could stand up here and introduce our speakers, but we have such a diverse and I think highly qualified panel up here. I think I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, and we'll start with Linda Paris-Bailey on the end. Linda?
Thanks. So I'm a playwright, and when I began to think about this play, which we can kind of talk about the catalyst for some of the work that we do together, I think about the importance of knowing who's speaking, and one of the things that I wanted to do was to kind of start the panel with just kind of an introduction of what our perspective is, what our personal history is. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to share some of that with you. As I said, I'm a playwright, and someone once asked me, "Oh, why are there always ghosts in your plays?" And I said, there aren't always ghosts and then I realized that they were actually right, that there are lots of ghosts in my plays, but I think it has to do with tribute. And I learned an activity from Jawole Wilajo Zola about the ghosts that we bring with us into a room, and it was a way of articulating in the form of ghosts and people that we bring, our belief system and what is important to us and in value. And since I can talk forever, I wrote some of this down so I could read it and not go over my 2 minutes, which I probably will already do. I'm a playwright that works with ensemble. I believe in the power of story to transform and reframe our experiences. I bring playwright Joe Carson in the room. I'm a 61-year-old African-American woman that participated in the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, the human rights movement. I've never been in the military, but I come from a long line of squids. My father and both my brothers were in the Navy, and almost every adult male in my family served in Vietnam. And I had, at the time, somewhere around 15 cousins. So there are stories that haunt me, so I have to be very careful about what I take in. I suppose there's a contradiction there because I conduct digital storytelling workshops with people who've experienced trauma, and they reveal through these stories some of the experiences that shaped them, which are not all pleasant when you're working with ABE students, GED students, HIV/AIDS clients, and people in recovery. I've worked with communities doing what we now call devised work. I've worked with popular educators and cultural workers. I bring Jane Sapp into the room. I've worked with writers that tell the hard truth. I bring Robbie McCauley into the room. And finally, I bring the ghost of my cousin into the room, the cousin who died driving into a brick wall just off base in South Carolina, the one who's haunted me since I was 14 with a story I could not know but have interpreted now as I have written the character of an African-American soldier, a woman suffering from moral injury. I bring John Oliver Killens, author of And Then They Heard the Thunder, into the room, because he was my mentor, and he encouraged me to explore the story and share it with others injured by war, and that was back in the 70s. The mission of the ensemble I direct is to reveal hidden stories. I've been embedded in this work for as long as I can remember writing. It is a story that haunts me, hence the ghost in my writing. I know that it's a part of my cultural tradition to pay tribute, but I also know that tributes that we pay must also have a deeper intent and purpose. So when I write a play, when the ensemble begins the journey, we do so with the intention to stimulate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Rachel?
Hi, I'm Rachel Brink, and I am a program director at Tampa VA Psychosocial Rehabilitation Recovery Center in Tampa, Florida. And I'm going to follow your lead a little bit because I am not a veteran either. Someone on the plane asked me today, why did you start working at the VA? And I was stumped for an answer for a moment, and then I remembered that it was because of my father. My father was a World War II veteran, served 18 months in sustained combat in the Pacific Theater, a couple of the small islands in the Philippines. And probably had we invaded Japan, I wouldn't be here because I'm a baby boomer. And I think I probably started working for the VA because I wanted to understand my father. And one of the things that I say to veterans today is tell your story. Tell your story to your children. Tell your story to your wife. Because when you're no longer here to tell it, who's going to do that? I'm so very grateful to have the opportunity to be here today. I think we are bringing to you something that's very important. It's a frontier. Many of us and many of you out there may be pioneers in this frontier of using creative arts and expressive arts in a very unique and very direct way to heal people that are hurting. We've found that by incorporating creative and expressive arts into our recovery program with veterans with serious mental illness, and we specialize in psychiatric rehabilitation. I liken that to if you've had a heart attack and then you go into cardiac rehab, or you've had knee surgery and you go into orthopedic rehab. We do psychiatric rehab, and we also do community integration. Recovery, we believe that everyone with mental illness has the capacity for recovery and has the right to live in their community as a full citizen and to enjoy all the things that life has to offer. And that is our mission. That's what we do each and every day at the Recovery Center. Our veterans are a cross-section, but they also suffer from severe depression, bipolar disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, schizophrenia. The veterans that come into our program have long-standing serious mental illness, but we believe that they have the capacity for recovery. By linking with community partners such as Linda and Andrea, we're providing our veterans with the opportunity to take their art into the community, to allow them to have full access for their artistic expression. And we discover that when they find their voice, they begin to let go of those chains of stigma that have bound them and have prevented them from being those full citizens, embracing all that life has to offer. So I'm very grateful for the community partnerships that we have forged.
Thank you, Rachel. Andrea?
Hi, my name is Andrea Saff, and I'm the founding artistic and executive director of Art to Action, Inc., which is a relatively new organization. And I also had the honor of being the director of the play, Speed Killed My Cousin, written by Linda Paris Bailey. And I have the honor of being a volunteer at the Psychosocial Rehabilitation and Recovery Center that Rachel is the chief of. So I get to work with these two amazing women and leaders, and I will follow their lead in saying why I do this. I'm Arab American. I'm Lebanese American specifically. And sometimes people ask me, why are you working with veterans? And really, I have been making work about war definitely since 9/11, 2001, and probably before. And one of the things that I came to realize at some point is that very few of us in the United States of America actually understand what war is and what we do around the world. And there are lots of people who might never come to see my work because I'm Arab American, might never even step in the door. They might not want to hear my story or this story from my point of view, but they will listen to veterans' stories if we can simply create the opportunities and the supportive spaces for those stories to be told and shared and heard. And if we can work in partnership, then we can expand this national conversation in new and important ways. So a little bit about, I forgot to set my timer. Oops. I was going to
I've got your back.
Great. Okay. A little bit about my philosophy of approaching this work is that I'm interested in transformation, both on a personal level and on a community level and on a societal level. And working in partnership with artists, working in partnership across disciplines, across communities, across identities, but also across fields, working with service providers, educators, organizers. And I believe and know to be true that the artistic process, the creative process, has therapeutic impacts. Even if you're not necessarily a therapist, which I am not. I'm not an art therapist. I'm a professional artist who works in partnership with therapists and social workers and activists. And it's important to have those partnerships across sectors and disciplines in order to increase impact. And that long-term engagement is necessary to create meaningful and lasting change. It can't always be just a project. Sometimes it's a project, but if we care about change, sometimes it's a much longer-term relationship of working together.
That's great. Thank you, Andrea. So what we'll do next then is talk a little bit about the local Tampa model and the impact that that is having. To start off that conversation, we're going to go back to Linda to talk a little bit about telling the story and engaging the community.
Well, one of the things that I should say, since we're in Tennessee, is that the catalyst actually was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, where we began the process of researching and developing the play. So what you have here are people who were already engaged in the work in their own places and spaces. And the catalyst or spark was the production of Speed Killed My Cousin. And that's the catalyst for our collaboration as the root of it. And it grew from there. But I want to just make sure everybody understands that each person on this panel was doing their own work before we became a collaboration. So, and that important work is really at the root of our collaboration. I think if you look for a common thread in all of the things that we've said, it is that connection to story and its value and its healing power. So when we began the process of building Speed Killed My Cousin, we were collaborating with people in Knoxville. We were collaborating with the Vet Center in Knoxville. In our research process, we became partners of Theater of War. This was a long process, and when I did the timeline, I looked back to 2010, and this is 2014. So one of the things that everyone should know, if you're in it for the short haul, go home. It is a long-term process, and I have in my timeline when the story first formed itself, and it was probably 1967. The work that we have been doing is intergenerational. The piece that we built was a conversation between a father and daughter, one who was returned from an Iraq veteran who was a woman, an African-American woman, and we are interested in that story because it is a story that is not told and it's not heard, and that's part of our mission. But we tell that story in the form of a conversation in a car. That's the car in Speed Killed My Car. And the conversation is between a Vietnam veteran and an Iraq veteran, and it is about war and whether or not this young woman is going to survive this ride, or whether or not she's going to take her own life. So that's kind of the root of the play. When we began to think about what the play is, we of course know, after doing this since 1969, that if we are looking at impact, if we're looking at change, the play is only part of the thing. So you cannot leave it with that work. So we looked at how we could expand the work, how we could work deeply in communities with partners, how we could engage. When we developed the work, Andrea came on in the early part of the work and began the direction process and also acted as dramaturg on the work. And I don't know if you've looked at this little panel up here, but we're a little strange looking. I mean, let's face it, there's an African American woman, there's a European American woman, there's an Arab American woman, and we are working with veterans. I don't know if that struck you, but for a lot of people, that seems an unusual collaboration. But we were very deliberate in that collaboration, and we were very fortunate in bringing on not only Andrea, but being able to work with Rachel, and we kind of go into more of how that actually happened. But I just wanted to set some context about what the work was about, and I think we're going to showpiece, yeah? So I probably talked long enough. Let's look at a clip, and then I'll probably have used up my time, yeah? We'll see.
She has high in the sky, she's burning. IEDs, she can see down below. She's the angel of death, and some say she's the best. She does all that she can to survive it. Yeah, she rides it. She rides it.
The LIE is nothing like Iraq. The more he talks, the more it feels like Iraq. Sometimes you drive for hours and nothing would happen. And you let up, you know? Fantasize about being back home. But then you'll be brought back to reality by these pings. And you'll realize that someone was shooting at you. And you want to step on the gas, but you have 20 vehicles behind you and 29 in front of you, and they didn't even realize that they've been fired on. So it took a minute for everybody to figure out that it was time to get the hell out of there. That's a whole different kind of driving. That's the kind of driving that drives you crazy. We did some crazy things in Iraq. Had some crazy motherfuckers too. And being a woman, it was just a whole nother kind of danger. You know, people don't know about women and war men. They don't understand. They only talk about killing Hajis. That's what they call Iraqis. I know what you want to know. You want to know if I killed any Iraqis. But I was telling you about my dad and my cousin Linnell.
How can I help you when I haven't seen what you've seen? When I haven't been where you've been.
Look, I don't know why, but I'm home. So I'm trying to make the best of it, man. My family suffered while I was gone, so I just don't think it's right to not make amends for their suffering. Don't you understand? Didn't you see enough suffering over there to know what it looks like? Did you even look your mother in the eye when you came home? Or were you too busy looking at your own reflection? Look, we spent months over there trying not to look into people's eyes. But you've got to come home now. Start looking at things. Look at me. Look at all I've done. You are the only one that can see it.
So how did Speed kill your cousin?
What are you talking about?
Dad, you just said Speed killed your cousin.
I'm just telling a story, baby. I'm just telling my cousin's story.
My dad, he asked me about talks about the military-industrial complex and war and who profits, man, I can't relate. I don't care why people die. My politics are that people should live. My dad saw himself as a freedom fighter when he came home. Yeah, I think maybe the Panthers saved his life, but I don't know where my fight is. I don't even know what to do with my fight. I don't know how to live with all that shit that happened over there.
So what's your story?
What the hell?
I asked you a question, cousin. What's your story?
What the hell are you talking about?
I am talking about you.
Yeah, cousin. I can save the world. I can bring back folk from the dead.
Hey, why did you on speed?
She rises. She survives it. Yeah, she rises. She survives it. Yeah, she rises. Yeah, she rises. She rises. Yeah. She rises. She rises. She survives. Oh yeah, she rises. Yeah, she rises.
So I'll kind of close out with a couple of things. The digital storytelling process that we engage in, we were taught by Joe Lambert. If you know Joe, he's an amazing human being. But he always leaves this question, why this story now? So we asked ourselves, well, why is this story important now? And, you know, from an African-American woman's perspective, and I don't know if any of you have looked at the numbers of women in the military, but there are a lot of women of color in the military. And this story seems important now. Some estimates 30% and some even higher. Women are enlisting, women of color are enlisting in greater numbers. The rising rates of suicide and our things that are being revealed about military sexual trauma. It's an important story. It's important to talk about that. Services. It's important that we join the Voices for Advocacy. It's important that we kind of heal the generations and talk about the silence and shame, certainly from my generation in Vietnam. And I think you'll hear more about that, and veterans who are returning now. Also to look at the history of African Americans in the military, and you know how we deal with that subject matter is also important to us as a company. So these are kind of the foundations, but always the work is about healing. And I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to pass it on to you, Rachel, because I think I've used up my 10 minutes.
Thank you, Linda.
Great, thank you.
Our creative arts journey began in 2006 when a few of our veterans got together and formed a band. We came up with a name, thank you, Linda, came up with a name called Together as One, and that's kind of similar to what you have up here. They chose a logo where people of color were holding hands. And so we had a few instruments that we had purchased, some drums, a couple of guitars, and so they put this band together, and we'd had a visual arts program on and off for several years, but it didn't run steady. we're practicing mental health therapy. That's what we did. And creative arts was kind of a nice little sideline to have to keep individuals from becoming bored, I guess. I don't know what our reason was at that time. But we began to notice what was happening to them when they became involved with the instruments and interacting with the instruments. Then around 2008, we started a writing class. And this amazing narrative play came out of that drama class. And so we started a little drama workshop and we called them Voices of Recovery. So we would take them out in the community and they would perform, for senior centers, and they did a few things at the VA hospital. Then one day I had a couple of veterans come to me and said, Rachel, we find that when we play the drums, our mood gets better, we feel better, we have fewer intrusive thoughts, we don't hear the voices so loudly, and our anxiety is calmed. Is there any way that we can get some more drums and possibly have a drum circle? And I thought, well, that's cool, that'll be fun. Gee, I could teach a drum class. That would be a lot of fun. And so we started looking for funding, and there was a little competition going on in the VA through the VHA Innovation Program. And we entered, and we asked for a few instruments, and we thought it might be nice if someone from employee education could come and film this remarkable thing that was happening with the veterans. And we won. We didn't really expect to, but we won. It caught their attention. And they gave us a challenge. They said, we're going to give you some funds, but we're going to give you a little bit more than you asked for. And what we want you to do is we want the veterans to learn how to use these video cameras. We want them to learn some pretty sophisticated software. We want them to write some songs, and we want them to film a documentary. And I told you our population, right? and I thought, okay, I don't want to turn down money, but I was a little nervous about how we were going to pull this off. And we put the cameras in the hands of the veterans. We put the computers in front of them. We showed them how to download tutorials off of YouTube on how to edit, how to create music, and how to edit the film that they were creating. And we saw some amazing things happen. We saw them develop this teamwork and this core of an industry. And we saw them begin to become excited about coming together and developing something that was truly their own and that was inspired by them and created by them, that was for them and about them. And it was about their recovery. They developed those photography skills. They learned how to use the software. They learned to play instruments. We had someone come in and teach them how to play guitar, keyboard, and drums. And they began to tell us how good this felt. I remember one female veteran telling me, Rachel, I feel like I'm getting my mind back. And I thought, there's something to this. So in addition to the subjective reports from the veterans, we developed just a small longitudinal study to support the self-reports. And we assessed 20 aspects of recovery, both as a pre-test and a post-test at a 1-year interval. 18 of the 20 items that we measured scored positive change. The most significant areas of positive change were coping with my symptoms interfere less and less with my life. One of the other ones were my symptoms seemed to be a problem for shorter periods of time each time they occur. And one that I found very interesting, we had a very significant increase in the item that says, I like myself. And if you've worked with veterans, you know, especially with combat veterans or veterans with any long-standing mental illness, that can be a problem. You know, they can feel like they're their own worst enemy sometimes. So for someone to say, you know, I genuinely like myself is pretty profound. We were awarded a VA Strong Practice designation this year, and we're now piloting this veteran-centered, veteran-directed creative arts program in 2 other VAs in the country. We believe that creative arts can be integrated into any mental health treatment program, and that it can be done at very little cost. Some of the data that we're collecting now, we're seeing a trend that the veterans are telling us creative arts is as important to their recovery as educational groups, and by that I mean psychoeducational groups, or community outings. It helps them handle stress and increases their self-confidence. They're also able to have more fun, which is something that veterans with long-standing mental illness, and certainly veterans with PTSD, they don't think they deserve to have fun. So again, I don't want that to slip by you as insignificant. For a veteran to say, I've learned how to have fun again is very significant. They are telling us through this data that we're collecting now that creative arts is essential to their recovery, and also that they would encourage other people to participate in a creative arts program to help with their recovery. I'm not a creative arts therapist either. I'm a social worker by profession. I'm a mental health director by my association with the VA. I did take piano lessons as a child. I have sung a little. I even strapped on a guitar in my teens. I directed a children's choir at church for a few years, many years ago. And I even took a couple of music electives in college. That has actually helped me more than anything in this. But that's the extent of my expertise. I feel that it does take a community to raise an arts program. I wouldn't be able to do this for these veterans to the extent that we've done it without my 2 partner women on either side of me. By developing the community partnerships with Art to Action and with Carpetbag Theater, we've been able to bring in professionals that have been able to work with the veterans, help them learn to open up and express what has been hidden, their pain, their fears, their hope, their dreams, and their joy. The talent is out there, and I'm sure it's out there in this audience today as I'm looking at you. Mental health issues in the VA are varied and they're very complex. Veterans are a cross-section of society. While many veterans do have a history of combat trauma, others suffer from trauma that has occurred at the hands of those in their own homes or trusted friends. Still others have chemical imbalances that make it difficult to regulate mood or that distort auditory, visual, and thought perception. Integrated along with the emotional wounds are the physical wounds of traumatic brain injury, loss of limb, stroke, cardiac disease, neurological illnesses, and so forth. Many are dealing with the loss of role and the loss of personal identity. Many of the combat veterans are stripped from their role as a soldier because they've endured an injury that makes them no longer fit for duty. and that's very difficult. Because their mental health issues are varied, so must be our treatment. There is no one-size-fits-all for healing. We have to listen to what each individual needs. I have seen firsthand the value of music, drama, and visual arts for their healing. These veterans with serious mental illness were able, in less than 3 years' time, to create a remarkable documentary called Inspirations of Hope and Recovery. And it was this documentary was recently screened for the public in Tampa, and we're going to show you a clip of that now.
Basically was scraped up off the sidewalk by the police. And of course I did have a choice to either move on or go to the hospital. And I couldn't move on. I was so weak and in bad shape physically. And part of that was a result of my last suicide.
I'm having these bad thoughts. And they hospitalized me and they said I was experiencing postpartum depression after having my son, my only child, Xavier.
The streets, sleeping on the streets. Last 25 years off and on, I've been homeless off and on. Had to go Pure Hill. So I would tell anybody else, anybody that's got a mental illness to check in, don't do like I did. I waited 32 years before I checked and asked for help. And it's okay to come in and ask for help.
What about Marcus? Oh, I'm going to take him with me. We're going to drive over our Franklin Bridge, and then she stopped me right there. She said, "Wait a minute, we're going to the ER."
Walked for 8 hours in Los Angeles at nighttime in the streets, and I could have gotten a lot of serious trouble. And I was just very lucky that nothing happened to me.
Last time I tried suicide, I ran my car into a tree, probably around 60 miles an hour, so I hit hard. I guess that brought me to realize that I really don't want to die.
It's really hard to put into words. You know, it means so much to be able to come here and people understand how I feel. People understand what I'm going through because they're going through the same thing.
I didn't know what to do, where to go, where to start, what door I will open, what door I will close. It's a difficult choice. I entered the door, a helping hand showed me around with a smile on his face, shake of a hand, we are family.
Sometimes you need a helping hand to kind of reach into that hole and pull you out, and that's kind of what I got from the VA. I guess you can almost call it a second chance, because without them, I couldn't see myself, getting out on my own.
I actually have wrote a piece that's done with a 3-person group. It's called Beating Out Stigma. And even though you can't beat out stigma with a drum, but you know, the drums inspired me to tell people my story. Mentally, I'm more stable to do things around, and I'm happy.
My name is Roberto de Rios, and I love to dance. Eso es lo mío. My faith.
Through our recovery program that that not everybody that I can be okay if I'm not happy with everybody. Like my happiness doesn't depend on everyone else being happy around me.
So I first started working with veterans actually from an activist point of view. As I was developing one of my own pieces in 2011 called 11 Reflections on September, I started partnering with Iraq Veterans Against War, which I'd first become aware of in 2008 when I presented a piece by Elia Arce called The Fifth Commandment that was created in collaboration with a man named Matthew Howard, who turned out to be one of the founders of Iraq Veterans Against the War. And so I was doing that work, and in the midst of that, Linda invited me to direct Speed Killed My Cousin, which led me to get involved in the research and reading and beginning to understand post-traumatic stress disorder, military sexual violence, MST, and the issues of women in the military, and particularly the Iraq and Afghanistan combat zones. And doing that research as part of preparing to work on the play, Speed Killed My Cousin, which opened at the network of Ensemble Theaters Microfest in Knoxville, Tennessee in 2012? 12. And so then it was a piece that was created with the idea of touring it nationally. And we started looking for funding and opportunities to tour it. And we were able to get support from alternate routes through the program at the time was called CAP, or Community Arts Partnerships, but has become Partners in Action. It's been recently renamed. And I found an interesting similarity in what Rachel just said, because we applied, Linda and I applied together for that support from alternate routes, and they said, we're going to give you more than you asked for, because what you're trying to do here is a lot bigger than this one grant or this one tour. And so I mention that because it's important to note that happened in both of these examples, and it's really rare that ever happens.
Really rare.
So there's something about funders and partners who are contributing resources recognizing the value and the bigger vision of the work and actually investing in it that makes it happen. So what we decided to do with that support from Alternate Routes was to bring Carpetbag Theater to Tampa, Florida, and develop a residency and begin to develop this model and work on a model that we could replicate as the piece tours around the country. So I'm going to talk a little bit about building a residency for this kind of work and how partnerships have evolved out of that. So, you know, when we were bringing Speed Killed My Cousin and Carpetbag Theater to Tampa, our partners were immediately, of course, the Carpetbag Theater and Alternate Routes. And I started asking around about veteran programs or organizations that might be interested in this. And someone at the University of South Florida, a theater professor in the School of Theater and Dance, said, you know, I heard that there's a veterans drama group. And I said, a what? You're kidding. And so I was like, I have to find these people. Who are they? And I was directed to Rachel's program at the PRRC. And if you could go back one slide real quick. The man holding the guitar there is Sheldon Donovan, and he's a veteran peer leader at the PRRC, and he was very instrumental in starting up the drama group specifically. And when I met them, they had already written 2 versions of the script, and they were already doing readings in the community at churches or at the USF nursing department, for example. And then I came in and Sheldon said, oh my God, thank goodness, somebody who knows what I'm supposed to do with this script. And so they became a definite immediate partner, as did the University of South Florida. So I mention this to say that, you know, these are really different kinds of partnerships and folks who don't often get together and work together on something. In addition, a local coffee house, local business, Sacred Grounds Coffee House. We had the idea to start a veterans open mic, and they said, great, we'll host it. What night do you want? And they gave us the first Sunday of every month, 6:30 to 9, and we just started a veterans open mic, and that's where the activist partners came back in. Veterans for Peace said, this is fabulous, we want to be a partner on this. We want to work with you on this. And part of the idea behind that was the recognition that when people are actually in the VA or in a service provider environment or on government property, there's some things that they don't talk about. Some things that they either someone has told them they shouldn't talk about, or they instinctively feel that they're not allowed to talk about, whether that's true or not. But there's a certain level of let's say self-censorship that happens on government property. And so an open mic at a local coffee house became another space for veterans to express not only their stories and their experiences, but also their points of view, and to have that sometimes difficult conversation about different points of view. About their military service, about the military itself, about particular policies, through a creative means. And so when I'm co-hosting or setting the kind of ground rules in that space, one of the things that we say every time is we don't all have to agree, but if you feel like you don't agree, battle it out on the mic. You know, express it with a song or a poem, respond to each other. But we have to all agree that this is a supportive and safe space for everyone to express their points of view. So these very different partnerships, like there are cases where the VA staff and Veterans for Peace organizers literally can't be in the same space together or can't co-host an event, right? But the point of having those different partners is recognizing that veterans have all kinds of different points of view, and if you want to reach every veteran in your community, you have to have multiple partnerships and different kinds of partnerships if you want to create spaces that are truly open and welcoming of all veterans. So, let's see. Building a residency. So the residency itself was 10 days that Carpetbag Theater came into town. In addition to preliminary visits, a site visit that Alternate Roots did that was really a catalyst for getting all these partners together, and some visits to help build those relationships. But then a 10-day residency that included a lot of teaching in the University School of Theater and Dance, hosted by USF, rehearsals for the company, workshops at the PRRC, the Veterans Open Mic, digital storytelling workshops at the PRRC, and an open rehearsal, which was a performance / dialogue. And a really interesting thing happened at that dialogue, which was the James A. Haley Veterans Hospital suicide prevention team showed up. And in the dialogue, we were, which I'm sure wasn't new to Rachel, but for Linda and I, we were introduced to a new term because we had been talking about this as Speed Killed My Cousin as a play about PTSD. And Dr. Lynn Santiago said, I don't think your play is about PTSD. I think it's about moral injury. And we said, moral injury? Oh, there's a word for this? And in fact, there's a word in a whole area of the field that's starting to try to grapple with and understand more deeply moral injury. And Lynn Santiago actually wrote a fantastic article called Moral Injury Killed My Cousin, which you'll find on the Alternate Roots website, and I encourage you to read it, that talks about it. The most basic way that she explained it to me was, well, PTSD is about what happened to you, and moral injury is about what you did or didn't do. And that, in fact, studies are starting to show that there's not as strong a link between PTSD and suicide, or PTSD as a driver of suicide in veterans. There's a very strong link between moral injury and suicide. And this is a much harder thing it's a much harder thing for us to talk about as a society, and something that we really, really need to talk about. So this work is ongoing. The weekly drama workshops at the PRRC are ongoing, and community performances that arise out of that. The Veterans Open Mic is ongoing. If you're ever in Tampa, drop by on the first Sunday of the month at Sacred Grounds. And Speed Kill My Cousin touring is also ongoing, and we hope to also continue working we also hope to continue working with Carpetbag Theater in Tampa to continue this work. A couple of, how am I doing on time?
About 2 minutes.
Ooh. A couple of important points I just want to bring up about why this works. Why does, say, teaching or coaching an arts, a drama workshop at the Recovery Center work? And I want to begin to articulate this from an artist's point of view, because I think there's a lot more work that we can do in this area and maybe can be part of our discussion. But that, art therapy and creating a work of art are sometimes different goals. So why is creating a work of art in collaboration with community important? And it's kind of part of the premise is this idea, much like the documentary that Rachel was talking about, that community building happens when people actually do something together and have a shared goal and create something. But you can also see in the skills that one might be trying to impart in a therapeutic process and the skills that one tries to teach in an acting class, there's actually a lot of overlap. Like, for example, focus. Being in the present, connection, truly listening, taking your attention off yourself, gaining confidence in your own voice, gaining public voice, the experience of self-expression and passing through a process of catharsis in order to create something, in order to identify what it is that you have to say, telling your story, as we've talked about, which in therapeutic terms, or specifically trauma, might be parallel to the importance of reconstructing a narrative. Reconstructing the narrative of what happened as part of healing trauma, right? That's something that you'll find in trauma studies. But constructing a narrative is what we do all the time in building, a play or devised theater piece. Letting go of self-judgment and confronting or conquering fear, whether that's stage fright or whether that's why you don't want to write about a particular experience. And those are things that I would teach in any acting class, in any writing class. But they do have therapeutic benefits as well. So I'll stop there and look forward to our conversation.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. Thank you all. All right. And it looks as though we do have a few questions. Great. Does anyone else have any questions that you'd like to ask? Kate will come around and grab them. While she's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and start with the first one. Can you talk about any specific,
Resistance.
Resistances. Okay, thank you. Can you talk about any specific resistances? Thanks, Kate. You encountered that your arts-based partnership on the side of the military on healing in the continuum, you attempted to strategically turn and hopefully turn that resistance around. And how did you sort of come to those opportunities?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Well, I think that coming from a bureaucracy, you have to make sure you have leadership on your side when you delve into the unknown. And we've been very, very fortunate that our hospital director has been totally on board with this, and her having seen the documentary herself just has been such a wonderful support. It's healing to the veterans, so that's an easy sell. They're deriving benefit from it, and we've been able to show that through what they tell us and what the data shows us. So for me, it has been a very easy sell. I really haven't had any resistance at all. I mean, you're going to have some practitioners, maybe psychiatrists or other individuals that, are not going to trust it the way you did, initially. And but when you see the proof of it, when you see this documentary and you see what they've accomplished and that they're getting better, it's an easy sell.
And just to respond, as working on a national effort to really bring people together across sectors and break down silos, leadership is extraordinarily important, and leadership changes all the time. And really understanding how you convey your message and continue to bring new people into the fold and build those partnerships, I think has sustained us through some very crazy times, including our last national summit was done under the shadow of the sequester, which has never before happened to the military. But the number of military passionate people who we were able to have a conversation with and demonstrate value were really the ones that led the charge to make sure that event happened because they cared about it. And building those relationships can actually sustain through some pretty tumultuous times. And we continue, I think, from that small group in 2011 of really passionate individuals. And I encourage you to look at the website, artsacrossthemilitary.org, which has all of those groups. We continue to expand that because there's also the value of cross-sector and reaching across different experiences, because there really is nothing like peer-to-peer messaging and getting those stories across to the right policymakers and people and decision makers.
Yeah, I'd also like to speak to the importance of leadership. In Tampa, we have the benefit of the leadership of retired Lieutenant General Martin Steele, who is now the executive director of the Office of Military Partnerships at the University of South Florida. And he is very much understands the importance of the arts in this work and is a supporter. And with him, we are in the process of envisioning how to continue this work, deepen it, and strengthen it with support and multiple partners. And maybe we can talk about some future ideas later.
Great. I think this next one's going to go out to Linda and Andrea. Less than 20% of veterans are women, yet the growing population of drug abuse, homelessness, and despair are women who have served. How can we use the arts to help tell and heal her story and his story? Do you see a disparity in treatment? If so, how can the arts close the gap?
I'm not sure we can do all of that. I mean, and I'm not being flippant about it. I think certainly the kinds of healing that we've seen at PRRC and the value of the work ongoing with women veterans is important and needed. How do we impact policy, I think, is kind of at the root of that, and more about how we take action. And we know that we are allies, we are supporters, but I think, we have to understand what our limitations are and look to allies to work through some of those issues and processes. I think that is always our strategy in terms of looking at who our allies are and how we address and how we can serve our allies. So, Andrea?
I'd just like to add that something that Linda said earlier, one of the first things that I learned from a VA staff person that was really surprising to me, although I don't know why I was surprised looking back, is that the majority of women veterans are African American. The majority of women veterans are African American. That's not necessarily the impression that we get from the media, is it? But that's the situation. And it's one of the reasons why Speed Killed My Cousin is a really important story and a way to begin to create spaces to tell that story and to have dialogues about it. So I think, as artists, one of the things we can do is keep creating ways to tell those unheard stories and to bring the truth and reality of the situation that veterans are facing, but that we as a society are facing, to public attention, to in the public sphere, whether that's in your local community or nationally. I don't know if Rachel has anything she wants to add.
I think storytelling is one of the most effective ways of helping our female veterans. I'm going to go out on a limb here because I only have statistics from my program, but I will tell you probably about 12% of my program membership right now are female veterans. And every single one of these women have suffered military sexual trauma. Every single one of them. And I will also tell you that not just women in the military suffer military sexual trauma. By providing a safe environment, by building that trust and that rapport in that environment where people feel okay to tell their story, is where the healing begins. And I think both Andrea and Linda have helped us with that tremendously, with the digital storytelling. And I even told my story, and I was surprised at the pain that came up for me in telling that part of my life that I used to share with my digital story. With Andrea, being that catharsis, allowing them a place on stage where they're not back there anymore, but they're center stage again. Their life is center stage again, and they have a right to tell their story. They have a purpose to tell their story, and understanding that by telling their story, they're helping other people.
That's great. And you know, the issue of women who served, one of the challenges I found as I was researching PTS, TBI, military sexual trauma, MST really came to the forefront, and it was something I'm embarrassed to say after 12 years of service I was blind to. And when I started to do more research, what I found was that the challenge is most women in the military don't feel as though that have served, don't feel as though they're veterans and entitled to the benefits. So I think there's an opportunity for the arts there to break that wall down and help them realize and recognize the value that they bring. And 50% of women in the military have reported sexual assault. Of all of the military sexual trauma that's reported in the military, the largest percentage is actually reported by men. So there's a huge opportunity for the arts to break down that stigma, break down that barrier, and really break through.
And I'd just like to add one of the transformational moments, and this is where I like to make a little bit of a distinction between art therapy as a process and creating art as a process, because in an art therapy process, you may or may not ever arrive to a performance, because that's not necessarily the goal. The goal is the therapeutic process. But there is something that happens in the moment of performance that is truly transformative, which is when someone tells their story on stage in public for the first time and maybe saying the scariest thing they can imagine saying out loud, and really feel like they might die right before they say it. And then they say it, and they get a standing ovation. And that moment of watching the veterans receive applause for saying what they thought was the most taboo thing to say is transformative.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. All right, I think this next question is going to go out to Rachel first from a clinical point of view, and then I think, Andrea, I'd like to hear, since you brought up the moral injury perspective. And the question is, does the field recognize moral injury, or does the health community generally lump it in with PTSD?
I cannot speak for the medical field outside of the VA because I just don't know the answer to that question. I doubt that providers out in the community really understand that the way the VA understands that. We've been looking, I've been aware of moral trauma, moral injury, thank you, for about 5 years now. I first realized it when I was working with the very early returning service members, and there would be things that they would not tell me. They could not tell me. I couldn't even get a wedge in the door to get them to start telling their story. And I remember one young man, very young, just after about 4 or 5 months of working with him, just looked at me and started screaming, "You want to know? You want to know? You want to know what I did?" And he just blurted it out. And for a moment, I didn't know if I did want to know, but I listened and I heard what he had to say. And I think at that moment, I realized what moral injury was. I just didn't know the word for it. And soon after that, we started studying it and realizing actually a lot of the literature that's coming out is coming out through our chaplaincy service. because it's that part of post-traumatic stress disorder that's the spiritual wounding. And we've always said PTSD is a spiritual wounding, but again, we just didn't have the term. But it is. It's that peace, it's that hole, it's that emptiness, that void that they try to explain, and they don't have the words to explain.
Thank you.
My sense, and I'm speaking really from more of an anecdotal place of, as a person who gets to hear some disgruntled voices and talk with activists and people who are interested in systemic change, that there, you know, the VA is an enormous system, and there are incredible, incredible people doing incredible work within it. And it's also got all the challenges of an enormous bureaucratic system. And there are also lots of people who aren't ready to face the implications of moral injury, because it has implications about not just what one soldier did, but what our soldiers are doing, and what war itself is, and what it means when the U.S. decides to declare war or act like we're at war even if we didn't declare it. And there's lots of people for whom it's very hard to face that, and it's very hard to have that conversation, and therefore it's very hard to acknowledge it or in a diagnosis, or suggest that it might need a different kind of treatment. So as an outsider, my impression is that the psychology field and therapists and people within the VA there's lots of people working very hard to understand moral injury better and understand how to support veterans through it better. And as a society, we have a long way to go to really face it and deal with the implications.
Thank you. And my apologies to the last question. Out of sake of time, we're going to move on, because I'd like to give Marita a chance to just sort of bring us all back and really link the local initiatives to the national initiatives. So, Marita.
Thanks so much, Larry, and thank you so much, Linda and Rachel and Andrea, because I think their stories are stories that we've heard in various different incarnations and in different ways throughout the entire time that we've been working on this, and I think it really propels us and our commitment to the work. And it's a big job, a really big job, but there are people out there with very big visions who are accomplishing really extraordinary things, which also helps propel the work. So I'm just going to kind of give you some previews and also offer an invitation to really work with us and to hear what you are doing. I mentioned earlier in my remarks that the catalyst for our particular involvement, speaking from Americans for the Arts, was really initially hearing from first our local communities about recognizing that there were growing numbers of returning service members, but also members of veterans in their communities that really they want to serve and they want to become involved in. But still, those silos have already existed and still exist. On the other side was hearing from a whole range of military organizations and veterans groups about recognizing the value of the arts and coming to really understand that this is something that we can work on together. And they are actually coming to us, and they're excited about the opportunity to know more about local arts resources and how we can pull all those things together. I'm actually really very, very excited to announce that in February, We are going to be holding a third national summit, but this time expanding again that network of partnerships with the National Institutes of Health, the Center for Alternative and Complementary Medicine at NIH is going to be our partners in this, and what we will be doing is focusing on a specific area of the white paper that's talking about recommendations in research. And Rachel, I'm so happy you shared some of your findings. Part of always the challenge is what we don't know about the impact of the arts and how can we incent more funding, and some of that has really been initiated by the National Endowment for the Arts and their work with the Interagency Task Force on Arts and Human Development. But in the military, it's still a very under resourced and under recognized area, so we hope to change that. This whole panel was about storytelling. I have a great story, and it will continue to be a story. You can't have policy in your title and not get really, really excited when somebody reads your white paper. Really excited. And I had the best experience by having 2 phone calls from individuals who got a hold of, thank God for social media, however they got a hold of the white paper, called up and said, this really resonates with us. And we really want to figure out a way to work with you and the national initiative. And many of you, not on live stream, we'll make sure we'll upload this, but at your tables you have a flyer of a new initiative coming from called We Are Veterans, being spearheaded by probably one of the most dynamic people I've ever not met, but met on the phone at WGVU Public Media in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and a dynamic person, country western singer Michael Peterson, called me up and actually had read the white paper and said, we are really launching this with PBS. We want to get veteran stories out. We also don't want it to be just a place that lives on video, but we really want to start bringing together community resources to help share these stories and break down the silos, build the understanding, and we want the arts to be a part of it. So we are actually very proud and pleased at Americans for the Arts to be partners in this initiative. It is new, really brand new. Many local stations, many are probably in your communities, are joining and wanting to have the conversation. It's a multi-year effort under the banner of PBS's Stories of Service. So we really hope to kind of bring all of these, and it's an incredible amount of stories there. And then finally, a shout out to the other group who called and read the white paper. The folks at the American Legion Auxiliary that we're entering into a new partnership with, one of the major funders, long-term investors in the National Veterans Creative Arts Festival, which is an extraordinary program run by the Veterans Administration, but something that we actually have been in conversations to really expand from something that is so siloed into really engaging other facets of the arts community, into working with and the talent that is, even just scratching the surface is really amazing. So those are just some of the things that we're working on. There is always the policy aspect of it. I'll kind of close and say that one of the most extraordinary and successful events that we did around the white paper was we held a congressional briefing in November to introduce members of Congress and their staff to the white paper. Everyone, including the ones that lost recently in the primary, got a copy of the white paper. And we were amazed because, we invited not only our friends who we know are art supporters, but we invited staff from who serve veterans and focus on military issues. Over 80 staffers. It was one of the most bipartisan events that we could have hosted, and we were missing most of the Senate because an emergency hearing was called for the VA, which took out most of those individuals. And we have heard from different caucuses, and we're going to be doing different meetings. So there really is another comparable effort to make sure that we continue to open up the policy aspects of it and try to break down the silos and the things that prevent these kinds of partnerships from happening. Because there is good work, and sometimes it's happening by accident, or sometimes it's happening because someone is really creative and they can figure out how to do it. What we want to do is to facilitate this and make sure that this access is available to all military service members, veterans, their families, and their caregivers. It really does take a village and a community.
It does. Thank you, ladies. You know, in closing, I'll just say that whether you're an artist or whether you're an arts administrator, it really doesn't matter. There are opportunities at the grassroots levels within your communities, within your states, to really make a difference in the lives of those that have fought and served for our freedom that we enjoy today. And so take advantage of that, embrace it, and we heard a lot about partnership and collaboration, and I think that's where the opportunity lies really, is in the collaboration, being willing to talk to one another, being willing to step out and talk to organizations so that we can truly make a difference in the lives of those that have served. You know, I separated in 1992 after 12 years of service, so clearly I started when I was only 12, and when I separated shortly after Desert Storm ended, there was no arts in the military. And having been a musician before joining the service, if it had been available for me when I got out, I think my life would have been much different. Because I know when I played my saxophone, it helped me cope with stress, reduced anxiety, and just all around made my life more meaningful. I was happy with who I was. And it's a gift. And so please do what you can in your communities to engage with veterans, because you have an opportunity not only to expand the arts in your area, but truly make a difference in someone's life.
Thank you.
Thanks. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Larry?
Yes.
I don't want to interrupt the last word, but I just wanted to acknowledge some of the partners that weren't acknowledged in our panel.
Please.
And they are Alternate Roots. They are the Co-Festival of Performance. They're the Network of Ensemble Theaters. They're Tennessee Arts Commission, National Endowment for the Arts, and Ford Foundation. So I just wanted to acknowledge our partners.
Thank you very much, Linda. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.